you know.
Yeah.
And he
Good
says,
timing.
he says, Arnold Palmer? I said, yeah. And he says, well, he says, what do you have? And I told him about the offer, and he said, well, we need to tell Russell Hobart about this offer. And I said, okay. And he said, come into my office tomorrow morning, and we'll have lunch with him tomorrow at noon, and we'll tell him then. So we get in there, and he was not about to let me do that.
Really?
Yeah, he was saying, you know, and that's when I said, Mr. Hobart, if I can't do this, I said, I'm going to retire and quit. I'm just going to quit teaching, and, you know. And he says, you can't do that, you know. And I said, yes, I can, because I'm a math teacher and I'm in demand. I can go get a job anywhere. And so they relented, and they required that I come back a week early because of I was athletic director, and I had to take care of all the football, and I had to take care of all the ticketing for the football. And so I had to be back a week early. So I called Arnold Palmer Golf Academy, and they said, yeah, no problem, come out a week early, and then you can leave a week early. And I said, okay. So I did go out a week early. I got out there about the 10th of June, and that was in Vail, Colorado. And June 10th, there was snow on the ground.
Wow.
You know, and I was shaking my head, and we go out to this learning site. They had about a 40, 50 acre learning site, big circular learning site, had all kinds of different kinds of shots that you would play and target greens. It was just a great site, and it was a field. And so I said, this looks terrible, you know. And, you know, the guy that was running it, Bud Hosher, he said, well, we still have to bring in the sod. And I said, okay, I'm here. So, and the kids weren't there yet, so I laid sod and, you know, worked on the cutting the greens and so forth, so to get it in decent shape so we could teach these kids. We had 900 kids for a 3-week period. And there was we had 300. They were divided up into 5 groups of 900, and so we had, you know, 175 apiece. And I was one of the instructors, and we had college golf coaches that helped us. And I had about 4 or 5 kids. And every instructor had 4 or 5 kids, and I had the youngest group, 9 to 11-year-olds, and we taught them by exercise. And we would go through a pattern. I still remember this pattern. You know, feet shoulder width, knees slightly bent, weight slightly on your heels, hands in front of your left leg. That's what that's what we do for their setup, and we did that for 4 hours, and we take them through that, and you know, we say, okay, do it, and we run through this pattern, and they do it, and when we're saying all that pattern, they're actually, you know, they're actually learning that right then, and they would automatically do it. After 4 hours, it was very easy. Then we would take them to quarter swing without a ball. This is without a ball. Can you imagine taking a 9-year-old kid and not putting a golf ball in front of them and saying, okay, you got to do this, and we did it. And we took them from quarter swing to half swing to 3/4 swing to full swing, and that's the way we taught them. And we did 4 hours at every session.
Wow.
So we took them with the setup 4 hours, then we take them a quarter swing 4 hours, then we did give them a ball. And we told them, you know, we want you to hit this not very far, you know, hit it. It's a quarter swing, you're going to hit it, what, 20 yards. And we got them with the golf ball, and we teed it up and let them go quarter swing, and they pop the ball out there about 15, 20 yards. And then, you know, then you go to half swing, and they do the half swing without the golf ball, then with the golf ball, and worked all the way up to full swing with that. And it was just a phenomenal experience for me. And after 3 weeks, we had these kids for 3 weeks, I had 9, 10, 11-year-olds shooting in the low 40s.
Wow.
So, I mean, really impressive, you know, but it took a lot of time for them to get there. And, you know, obviously the feel of developing a short game is another thing. And, you know, the kids that could really feel that was automatic for them, those were the ones that were shooting in the low 40s.
Were you being taught at the same time you were teaching? Were you watching how some of the more seasoned golf pros were working it? Or were you not?
No, I was pretty much over. The one great experience was there was 5 of us that were instructors, and each weekend we had the weekends off. We had Saturday and Sundays off. So using Arnold Palmer's name, we would go down to Denver, which is about 2.5, 3 hours, and we'd get on different golf courses like Cherry Hills or Columbine or Lakewood Country Club or Denver Country Club, and using Arnold's name, it was really easy to have that happen. But you know, and then I learned a lot being associated with them, because they all were college golf coaches. I was the only high school golf coach in the group. And Arnold Palmer, when he called me, he says, I had to find out who this guy was from Painesville, Ohio, does everything, you know? And so, yeah.
Did you ever meet him?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arnold was there the first session he came in, the first 3-week session he came in, and we took tons of pictures, and I obviously still have a few of those, but and I took them immediately and got them developed. And the next week he was back for the second session. He flew in his jet. That was really cool. And you know, after we got done, he was there. The second time he was there for all day long, and then he was going to spend the night there. And he spent the whole day going around and talking with all the kids. I think he talked to every kid, 300 kids, and he put on an exhibition, and he was really a phenomenal person. And that night, at 4 o'clock or so, we would all meet in this one room, the golf pros, and we're all sitting in the room, and Arnold walks in. And he says, okay, I'm done with the kids. He says, what can I do for you guys?
Wow.
You know, and everybody's looking at him, you know, and I said, well, you can sign my picture for me, you know. And he autographed my pictures and a couple books he autographed, and then all of a sudden everybody had pictures and books, but and then we all went to the local establishment and had a couple of Rolling Rocks, and I remember Arnold it was about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and Arnold turned and looked at one of us and said, what time is it? I said, well, it's about 8 o'clock. And he says, oh, I was supposed to be in Murchison's house at 6:30. You know, and I said, well, you better get going. And he said, I'm going to stay here with you guys. So, I mean, he was just a really down-to-earth guy, and the greatest thing that happened was the next morning, I always got up early and I'd go out and walk, and I'm walking around town, and there was Arnold Palmer.
Okay. Walking
around town. So we walked and talked, and I was from Cleveland, and he spent a lot of time in Cleveland with the Coast Guard and played a lot of golf at Pine Ridge, and so we talked about that, and then he left that day, and then about 10 years later, In fact, exactly 10 years later, one of my members here at Chautauqua was a member at Laurel Valley. And he came to me and he said, "You want to go down and play Laurel Valley?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely." And so we go down and we're playing Laurel Valley, and we are right behind Arnold Palmer.
Wow.
And Arnold, in fact, Arnold even didn't come back to me. He came back to one of the other guys in the group, because we were a foursome and he was a fivesome. And he comes back, he says, "I know we're a little slow." He says, "Do you guys want to go through?" And, you know, this guy says, "No, it's okay. We're having a good time," you know. And so afterwards, we're all in the grill room, and everybody is saying, go say hello to Arnold. You know, he used to work for him." I said, "He's not going to remember who I am, you know." I mean, and so finally I go over and I said, "Arnold Palmer, my name's Stan Marshaus. I worked at your golf academy in Vail, Colorado." And he says, "Yeah," he says, "you were from Cleveland, weren't you?" So he remembered. I mean, that's a phenomenal person, I think, you know, that could remember those things.
You also had a chance to be affiliated with Jack Nicklaus.
Yes, I did. I worked 3 years at the Lost Tree Club in North Palm Beach. One of my members up here, Jeff Myers, was a member there, and actually got me the interview and the job, basically. And so a couple great stories came out of that one. We were having a tournament. Well, Jack was kind of standoffish. You know, he didn't talk to you. I mean, hard-headed German like me, you know, and he didn't talk to you, and so for probably about 4 months I didn't talk to him. You know, everybody, some guy.
You taught him.
Yeah, somebody was, you know, other guys were walking around, you know, if Jack stopped short, you know, and these guys were in trouble. But I said, "Hey, if he's not going to talk to me, I'm not going to talk to him." So one day he calls the pro shop, and we had a mixed member guest, 36 foursomes, 2 on every hole. Mm. And he calls the foursome or pro shop, and he says, "I want to play out there this afternoon." And I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Nicholas, we don't have room for you." And he says, "What?" He says, "I play this game for a living." I said, "I know that, sir, but you know, we've got a mixed member guest, got 36 foursomes, 2 on every tee." I said, "You wouldn't be happy out here today," you know. And he says, "Well, I'll find someplace else to play or something," you know. And the next day he came over to the pro shop, and he walked right in and he says, "Are you Stan?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he says, "I'm Jack Nicklaus." And that was, you know, after that, yeah, it was. We were great after that, and he did a lot of favors for me, and so he got me on a couple of golf courses down there that he had designed, and in fact, Mayaku Lakes was one of his first designs. Mm-hmm. And I went over and I said, I had another golf pro coming down from up here in New York, and I said, can you get us on Mayaku? And he says, "Yeah, call Marilyn in the morning." He says, "I'll take care of it." So I called Marilyn. She says, "Oh yeah, Jack said something this morning, and it's all taken care of. You're all set to go play Mayaku." So we go over and we play Mayaku. Pretty nice golf course. Not phenomenal, but nice. And Jack stopped me on the practice tee later in the week, and he says, "Hey, how'd you like Mayaku?" I said, "Well, it's not in very good shape." You know, and he looked at me and I said, "And by the way, that par 3, that blind par, he's got a blind par 3. You know, and it was only blind because the weeds had grown up so high, the palmetto bushes had grown up so high you couldn't see the green." I said, "That blind par 3, that's crazy." I said, you know, why would you do something like that? You know? Boy, about 2 days later, he comes back to me and he stops and he says, "You know what? You were right." I said, "What?" I said, he said, it's not in very good shape. And I guess he went out and looked at it, and so, but he didn't mention anything about the blind par 3.
So all of this is, you're working your way towards basically heading east from Cleveland, your day job, and ending up in this neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
I was, after Arnold Palmer, I went to work at a club in Cleveland called Acacia Country Club, and Bernie Haas was the golf professional.
That's in Lyndhurst, right?
Lyndhurst, yeah, South Euclid, Lyndhurst. It's now gone. They sold it to a shopping center. Anyway, Bernie Haas was a golf professional, and Bernie bought Cassadaga Country Club, about 20 miles east of here, and asked me if I'd come up and run it for him. So I did, and I worked 2 years there, and that might have been the hardest job I've ever had in my life. That was a job. I would cut greens at 6 in the morning and close the bar, not because I was drinking, but because I was working behind the bar at midnight or 1 in the morning, and get up the next morning at 6 and cut greens again. And so that was really a difficult job, and I think we did a good job for him. And there was a man named Vay Smith who used to sell Harley Davidson golf carts, and Vay used to come into Cassadaga on his way home from Buffalo or something, and stop, and we'd chat, and I don't know, I guess he must have liked me, and he said that Chautauqua was opening up, and he says, are you interested? And I said, absolutely. And he said, I'll set up an interview for you. So he does. He goes back and makes the phone calls or whatever, and he sets up an interview, and he comes back, and I call over to a guy named Roger Smith, and I set up an interview, and I come, and I'm talking to Roger Smith, and Harold Smith, who was the former golf professional, was still on duty. This was in like August or something. And I said to him, I said, does Harold know that he's not returning next year? And Roger Smith said, no, we haven't discussed that yet. And I said, well, then I'm not interviewing for this job. And he says, why not? I said, because I have a strict code of ethics. I do not interview for a job that's held by a golf professional. Yeah. And so I got up and walked out of the interview.
Really?
Yeah. But I was a math teacher. I could do these things, you know. And they called me back about a month later or so, and he said, we've taken care of the situation. We've informed Mr. Smith that he's not returning next year. Harold was 80 years old and couldn't hear. I'm getting close to that, you know. But you know, it was not a good situation for him to continue working. And they told him that, and I said, okay, I'll be glad to come over and interview. I talked to him, and I said, how long is this process going to take? And he says, we should have a decision in 2 to 3 weeks. I said, well, that's good, because I'm getting married in December, and I'd like to be able to tell my wife what we're doing, you know. And I didn't hear anything. Well, anyway, all the hoopla about getting married and all that was going on, I really wasn't thinking much about it either. And so I end up getting married, and now it's in December, and I haven't heard a word, and it's close to Christmas, and I called Bernie, and I said, Bernie, I haven't heard anything from Chautauqua. I said, what would you suggest I do? He says, let's go to Florida. He says, merchandise show is next week. We'll go to Florida. I'm sure I can get you a job. I said, okay. So we go down to the merchandise show, PGA Merchandise Show, which is a huge thing. Bernie knew, I thought, everybody. And I walk out of there with 5 jobs in one, probably about an hour and a half. And, you know, everybody was offering me these jobs. And there was 2 or 3 of them that were really good, like the assistant pro at the country club in Cleveland. Awesome place. You know, a teaching professional at a 36-hole complex in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I get back to the hotel room, and Bernie's in one bed and I'm in the other, and I said, what should I do, Bernie? You know, which one of these should I take? You know, relying on his advice. And he says, what did Chautauqua say? I said, well, they haven't called me. And he says, why don't you call them and find out? So I called Roger Smith, and I said, I've got a couple other offers. I said, I'd like to know where I stand with you guys, what's going on. And he said, where are you at? And I said, I'm in Florida. And I gave him my phone number and everything. And he says, I'll call you back. I said, okay. So I'm sitting there, and the phone rings, and Bernie answers it. And Bernie's talking away. He says, oh, yeah, he can do a great job. He knows all that stuff, you know. And Bernie hangs the phone up, and he says, I think you're going to get the job. And I said, well, who was that on the phone? He says, that was George Cornell. And George knew Bernie from Burning Tree. It's a very small world. George knew Bernie from Burning Tree, and George called Bernie and asked about me, and I'm sitting in the other bed. And then George obviously called back to Roger Smith and said, go ahead and get this guy. And Roger Smith calls me about a half hour later and says, when can you get back up here? And I said, I can leave tomorrow. And he says, no, take your time, but as soon as you get here, we want to talk to you. I said, okay. So that's how I got to Chautauqua, and I've been blessed, believe me.
This is 74 now, 1974?
74, yeah.
And what did you know about Chautauqua?
I had played here in 73. A couple of the guys from Cassadaga said, let's go play Chautauqua. It's a great place. Well, I came out of Cleveland. I came out of Acacia Country Club, which is an awesome place. Probably one of the top 5 in Cleveland. And I was very disappointed in Chautauqua at that time. And in fact, that's in my interview, when I went in, I said, they said, what would you do? I said, well, the first thing I'd do is put it into some decent condition because it's awful, you know? And it was really just a basic cow pasture type golf course. And, you know, and all I did was come in and do some basic things like cut fringes around the greens, and, you know, they thought I came across this lake. You know?
You also planted a boatload of trees.
Yes, I think it's over 4,000. There were years when we planted 300 to 400 trees on a time. We would do almost anything to get trees. The guy, Walt Russ, worked for me. He also worked for the state conservative department, and we went out to a state site out in Clymer, and the guy said, you can take as many trees as you want out here. And they were little pine trees, which are still up at Chautauqua at the golf club. We took about 200 out of there. We would just dig them all by hand and throw them into our truck and take them, bring them here. And we got trees from everywhere. I used to go to Walmart, and Walmart would have, you know, all those trees outside, and I'd go in and I'd say, I want to buy every tree you got. What kind of price can you give me? And they said, really? And I said, yeah, I want every tree. I said, come up with a price. And I would get trees for $10, $15 a tree. And we'd plant them, and then we bought some out of Cleveland. There was a nursery in Lake County Nursery Exchange, and they had bare root trees. So I would leave here at 5 in the morning, drive to Perry, Ohio, which is about 2 hours, with a truck, load up 40 trees, and drive back here and put them in the ground that day.
Wow.
So, and we would, what we did was I staked out where they were going, and they would dig the holes before I got back. All the holes were dug, so when I came back, all we'd do is set the tree in the ground and cover it up, and then we staked them the next day, and but we got, that's just a ton of trees like that. Just everywhere we could find them, we got them. So.
Well, I think I've hit most of them, so thank you. On the morning of June 14th, 1976, just before the start of your third season, you were awakened by a telephone call informing him of an event. What was this? Talk about it.
The fire. Actually, my neighbor, Bob Harper, I lived in Russ Arnold's house up here on north end of the grounds, and Bob Harper's pounding on my door, and he says, the clubhouse is on fire. And I go, oh my gosh, and I run out the door, and Jane said, you better put your pants on. And so I came back and I got dressed and I ran out there. Came up to the clubhouse, and they were pulling things out of the club. The clubhouse is in a full blaze. It was, and the president of the institution at that time was Oscar Remick, and he was pulling out furniture out of the main dining room. So I said, the hell with the furniture, get the pictures,
Yeah.
So we went in and we got as many pictures as we could off the walls, because there were some great pictures of Hogan and Snead, and we, so we saved as many of those as we could, and brought them, got them out, and the guy, George Schofield, was my starter, and he comes up and he says, hey, Stan. I said, what is it? He says, there's a foursome down here who wants to play golf. And I said, well, charge him and let's go play golf. So they went out and played.
You also rescued the blueprints.
Yes. They were in the back room of the clubhouse. I knew where they were. And I got all the blueprints from the Donald Ross, the original Donald Ross drawings. So those are very, very valuable.
What was the planning now? The clubhouse goes down. It's. I mean, you have to level it. Start all over again. What's the process?
Well, it was strange because my boss was Roger Smith, and he set up a committee to build a new clubhouse. That was John Conley Sr., Bob Osborne, and Scott Lawson, who was an architect. Mm-hmm. And we had a meeting or two, and then they set up a task force. The board of directors of Chautauqua set up a task force of about 24 people to discuss the building of a new clubhouse and whether the current location was the right spot, and all kinds of different things. And that was headed up by a man named Bailey, Jack Bailey, I believe. And so my committee, the committee of Osborne and Conley and Lawson and me, was disbanded, and we went into this other committee, and they finally reached an opinion that the current location was a good spot for the clubhouse. We talked about building it out on the hillside overlooking number 14 green, and then we'd have to change the rotations, and this would now become number 1, and there's all kinds of things like that. But they did finally decide that the current location was the place, and we went ahead, and then there was a committee of 8 to select the architect. And I was on the committee without vote. And so there was 7 votes. We interviewed 8 different architects, 1 hour apiece. Scott Lawson was one of the architects we interviewed, but the vote came down to 4-3 for an architect out of Pittsburgh, Clarence Klaus, and I would say he designed a very controversial building.
So I've read, yeah.
Yeah, nobody liked it, and in fact, we remodeled it twice to get it more functional, and it's still not the greatest functioning building. It should have a basement in it. It's got concrete floors in it, and that's difficult for all of your utility things. All your water, all your electricity, and so forth has to be above ground, and all of our water up there goes over top. So if they blow, if you get weather like this when it's 10 below, they blow that system out every year, and if they don't blow it out, it's really a bad thing. You got water everywhere when they turn it back on, and that has happened over my 35-year period there. So.
In the summer of 1979, Winston Thomas Smith, Chautauqua's Vice President of Operations, makes a discovery or a rediscovery up over there, and that ultimately becomes the golf course becomes a beneficiary of that. How does that all work?
He discovered a statue in the main gate going Manepka or something like that. They're going through all the junk. The main gate was basically a storage thing that they just kept putting things into. And he discovered this statue, and they sold it through Sobeys in New York City, and they got $275,000. And that became the fund to build the second golf course. To get that going a little bit more, George Cornell and Bob Cornell each donated $40,000 apiece to get us started on the construction of the second golf course. But we had the 275, and then we had George and Bob's 80, so we had $350,000, and we built the third 9 of the golf course within that budget, within that $350,000, which was phenomenal. I mean, that's really hard to do. When you're talking about greens now that cost $50,000 a piece, and a friend of mine just built a golf course in Naples, and he had a budget of $250,000 per hole. And so we built this entire 9 holes for $350,000. We hired an architect out of Pittsburgh, Zen Hassenplug, and he designed the golf course. I thought he did an excellent job on the layout. The layout is as good as you can get. He did a couple really smart things. Almost all the holes, when you play the new golf course, are down low, And all the high ground, where if they want to put in a housing development, is up high, so you'll have a view out over the golf course from the high ground, and you also have a view of the lake and the surrounding countryside, which is very advantageous if you're doing a development like that. So
You get a phone call from the President's Clinton's staffer saying they'd like to play golf. How does that change your schedule during the day?
Wow, that was a great day. I was in Jamestown.
I'm going to have you take your arm so you can be over the
Okay.
mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was hoping to do that. I was in Jamestown on Sunday. I had gone down to pick up something for the golf course. And they called me and they said, "We want you back here right away." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, Al Aiken was calling me. He says, "I can't tell you what's going on, but it's really big." So I get back and they said, "President Clinton's coming." And I said, "Wow." And so the next day, Monday, Kurt Hanlon shows up. Kurt Hanlon was the lead man for the president's team. And he comes in, he said, "I got the best job in the world." I said, "No, you don't. I do." And he said, "Okay." So he comes in, and Judge Cleveland was talking about security. Security is unbelievable. They were in, and they were in for, on Monday. Clinton didn't get here until Thursday. They went through everything. They went through my drawers. They went through every locker in the locker rooms. I remember saying to Kurt, I said, "Kurt, what are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, we got to be prepared in case, somebody put a bomb in here or something." I said, "Kurt," I said, "you are in the safest place you could possibly be in Chautauqua County, New York." I said, "I've owned a house here for 5 years, Kurt. I don't know where the key is." I've never locked my house. I said, nothing ever happens around here. So anyway, but they, on Friday morning, he came in on Thursday, and on Friday morning they called me and they said, "The president wants to play golf this afternoon." I said, "Fine, we'll be ready." And they said, "He wants you to be in the foursome." And I said, "Oh, great." So it's about, he's going to play about 1, and about 10 o'clock I put my shoes on because I figured if I didn't I'd probably forget to. And so I'm walking around, and my assistant, Troy, is a great guy. He turns to me, he says, "A pro," he says, "You better go sit down." I said, "Why is that?" He says, "Because you're going to have a heart attack." He says, "You're walking around here." So I'm sitting in my office, and Kurt Hanlon walks in and looks at me, and I got my shoes on and everything. He says, "Got some bad news." I said, "What's the bad news, Kurt?" He says, "Well, Leon Panetta decided to play. The foursome was Stan Lundeen, Erskine Bowles, myself, and Clinton." He says, "Leon Panetta decided to play, so you're out, Leon's in." And I'm sitting there really in shock, and I go, "Kurt, I don't know how to tell you this." He says, "What's that?" I said, "We don't allow Italians on this golf course." So he laughed, and he says, "Listen, President wants you to go around with him, tell him breaks on the green, yardages." And I said, "Kurt, you want me to be a caddy?" He says, "Yeah, sort of." I said, "You know how important I am? You want me to be a caddy?" And so they laughed again, but I did go out with them, and we played. They were on the hill course. They had a great time. Stan Lundeen, who you know well, and I know, I played quite a bit of golf with Stan, and he makes about a 40-footer on the second hole. And we're walking up to the third tee, and I said, "Stan, "You never made a putt like that when you were my partner." And Clinton laughed, and we had a great time. And the next that when we finished 18, this man is a consummate politician. We're coming down 18, and we were told in one of the advanced meetings that no autographs, no photos, etc. So I abided by that, and we're up on the top of the hill on 18, and we're waiting, and there's about 100 people lined up down there waiting for him. And I said to Kurt, I know there's no autographs, but I got an 11-year-old son. I said, he would just love to have that autograph, And he says, okay. So he goes over to Bill, and he says, Mr. President, he says, Stan's 11-year-old would like to have your autograph. Is that okay? And he says, sure. And I had a hat ready, and a pen, and so he signed it, and we get down to the green.
Did you give it to your son?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It was his Christmas present.
There we go.
Yeah.
Leverage.
And we're down to the green, and there's this crowd over. They've got him behind the yellow tape, and Bill, I shouldn't call him Bill, Mr. President says, is your son over there? And I said, I'm sure he is, sir. And he said, because he had a chip shot. He says, well, go get him and bring him over. So I went over and I got my son.
Cool.
It was great. And Luke he was so impressed, and he says, where are we going, Dad? I said, you're going to meet the president, And we go over, and we're on the green, and kids, this 11-year-old kid, how honest they are. It's just great. He had a jacket on that from the Olympics, the Atlanta Olympics, and we had bought it at Champion Outlet in Jamestown, and Clinton looks at this jacket and he says, the Olympics, did you go to the Olympics? And my son goes, no, we've got it at the outlet store. So, but the press photographer took a number of pictures, and about a month later, maybe a little bit longer than that, I got pictures in the mail that he had signed.
Wonderful.
And there were pictures of Luke and him, and Luke and me and him, and so it was great. Those were Christmas presents right there. So
how you beat that?
you can't. That was it. That was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Did he play twice or just once?
He played twice. He played that day with Erskine Bowles and Stanley. And then the next day they called, and they said, the president's going to play golf again this afternoon. I said, okay, great. And we had a tournament scheduled that day on the hill course, so we had to put him on the lake course. And it was a little more crowded that day, and I told Troy, I said, Troy, I want you to take a cart and go in front of us and tell everybody the president's coming and let us play through. So that's the way we set it up. And I was walking around again, and Kurt called and he says, you're definitely in the group this time. I said, terrific, so again, I'm ready. And they came up and they were labeling all the golf carts. They'd put communications, they'd put the doctor, they had a doctor that went with them. And they had this one cart that said, POTUS, P-O-T-U-S.
Yep.
And I said, what is that? He says, that's the President of the United States. I said, oh, okay. So I had my clubs on a cart, and this big military-looking, I think he was a colonel in the Marine Corps, he came over, he says, where are your clubs? And I said, they're over there on a cart. And he says, well, bring them over here. And I said, oh, okay, and I go and get him, and I bring him over, and he says, put him here on the president's cart. So I'm on the same golf cart with the president. And I said, I'm on the cart with the president. And he says, yep. He says, it's a twosome, just you and him.
Wow.
I said, really? And Kurt says, yeah, he doesn't do that very often. He must have liked you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, that's because I told him about Stan Lundine's putt, you know. But
Is he much of a golfer, Clinton?
yeah, he's about, I think he could be, at that time, he was very strong, hit the ball a long ways. He was probably a 11 or 12 handicap.
Mm-hmm.
He probably could have gotten down to, 5 or 6 if he really.
He's good. I mean.
Yeah, he's good. But it was, what an experience, you know. And
Wow.
I'm playing golf with the President of the United States, you know. Nice. Not too many people get to do that.
No.
No, you know. So.
Now we're going to get your autograph later.
Yeah.
So as we sort of wrap things up, you had a chance with Johnny Mathis, Dinah Shore.
Yep.
Uh,
Great times.
And you have a scrapbook full of memories of Chautauqua during the time from 74 through, when did you retire? 2006?
35 years. 2008.
Yeah, wow.
Mm-hmm.
What's the legacy up there? What's the Stan Marshaus legacy? I mean, you've got more pages than anybody in this book on the 100 years. But from your perception...
Well, I was 35 years here, so that's...
That's right.
Yeah.
So what's the legacy? You said back
Well, I think we changed the face of golf at Chautauqua. I can't tell you what a privilege it was to work here. I mean, it was working for Chautauqua Institution, the people, the administration, from Tom Becker down to Joe Johnson to Dick Reddington. They were all terrific people. And we just tried to give them the best possible facility for the price that we could, and we changed the look of it. We planted 4,000 trees. You know, it changed the whole dynamics of the golf course. It wasn't a wide open place where you just stand back with your driver and blast it as hard as you could. You had to think a little bit when you're playing the golf course now, and so. And being a Donald Ross golf course, it's a fun golf course to play. It's always enjoyable. I never tire of playing a Donald Ross course. For that point, I never, ever didn't want to come to work. I thought that, and I had opportunities to go to a couple other places during my tenure here, and I'm very thankful that I did turn them down, because a couple of them were pretty good offers, so.
Marshaus has been in charge of helping Chautauqua host the NJCAA Division III golf tournaments since 2000. You were chosen to be the Western New York PGA Hall of Fame in 2002. And in 2000, participated in the Grand Slam of Golf in Maui, Hawaii, with winners of that year's PGA, U.S. Open, British Open, and Masters. What was that like? I mean, God, it was the who's who.
Yeah.
You intimidated at all? As it just
Yes. That was a year that Payne Stewart won the U.S. Open, and then died in the plane crash. So it was Jose Maria Olazabal, Tiger Woods, Paul Lawrie, and that was the year that Paul Lawrie beat Vanderbilt at Carnoustie, when Vanderbilt made 8 on the last hole. And Davis Love III replaced Payne Stewart. I was scheduled to play with Payne Stewart, which I thought would have been great. And I met Payne a couple times when I was on the National Board of Directors. We used to work the Ryder Cups, and I met Payne at the Ryder Cup. In fact, I met him just had dinner with him maybe a month before he died. we were up in Boston at the Country Club, and we had dinner at the gala dinner, and then a month later, he died in a plane crash. So, and he was a great person, and really, but Davis Love was also a great person, so I got to play with Davis. I played with Paul Laurie. I had dinner with Tiger Woods. It was a great experience,
As you watched, you've seen, played with, met, kind of the icons of this business. Is there one person, from a personality perspective, you'd say it was just an amazing individual or amazing golfer? Is there one that stood out?
Yeah, no problem. Arnold Palmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best. He's absolutely the best. Jack Nicklaus was very, very good, and very good to me after it took us a while to get to know each other, but he was very good to me. But Arnold Palmer was incredible. I mean, he, like I said, the first time he was there, he went around, I think he talked to every kid. 300 kids, he talked to every one of them. So, and then, he talked to me, and like I said, 10 years later, he remembered who I was. An incredible individual to be able to do that kind of things. So, that's, the Golf Channel is now running an Arnold Palmer and me thing. I ought to call him and say, this has happened, so.
Well, 30-some years here at Chautauqua, and people will still, 30 years from now, people will talk about having met Stan Marshaus. So we thank you.
That's a real honor.
Terrific.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Stan Marshaus.
Thank you.